Hey, Damien, thanks for coming in. I just was writing you a message about how you could prepare. That I thought, oh, this might be a good little video snippet.
Yeah, thanks for
Um,
having me.
First thing I want to show is the review session document. I'm going to put it in the Zoom chat, but I'll just share it with you also, and then make sure I get this in the YouTube description so that people can get there. Basically, this is a document that I share in the review session,
All right.
which is a way of saying also just sort of generally that my first piece of advice, which you're not going to be able to do because you've already scheduled your assessment and we talked about the timing, but for other people watching this video, I think post project, most important thing to do, and even as you're sort of coming to the sort of I'm finishing up, I'm tightening up screws and fixing little requirements, is to get to a review session, spend time in the review session. The main point is to help people be prepared for their assessments, particularly the live coding is the main focus, because that's the place where I noticed as an assessor that people struggle most in phase 4. But also sometimes we talk about the conceptual questions, specifically the request response cycle. We'll talk a little bit more about
When it
that in a
comes
second.
to when it comes to the live coding session, is there any particular area I should focus in more?
Oh yeah, we're going to get to that.
All right.
So this section here is just sort of was written as a breakdown of my kind of live coding flow and how I present this to students. And this video goes over that. So this is a good link to kind of watch at some point. So
All right.
if you can, this is advice to a general student, not to you because you can't, but if you can get to the review sessions, spend some time in there. It also helps to build some synchronous work time with other people, paired programming. I think that's really an awesome benefit. Okay, so next step, you can't go to review session, so what do you do? So I think that the first thing is to go to Discord. Is that being shared still, or did I just share my Chrome?
You just shared your Chrome.
Okay, stop that. Share desktop. Okay, so in the phase 4 Flex Resources channel, the top post is Charlotte's pinned post, and if you go to that, probably you already know about the office hours. This is the review session calendar, but a little further down, whoop, did she change this? Well, it used to be the study guide in here. Let's change this to resources. Resources. The heck? Oh, we're in Flask. Sorry, my apologies. Rails. Resources. Okay, here we go. Yes, lecture recording, study guide. So I think a good place to start is always the study guide. Hopefully you've seen this document because you used it to kind of look at the requirements. I know the requirements are in different places, but this is a nice document that kind of walks through what you need. And then looking at the next step, talking about, this looks at sort of being able to talk about these things. So, and this document was written as a precursor to the review session. So it's like, this is what you should use to help you prepare for your assessment. So this is a great document, good place to start. So once you kind of looked at that and you're thinking about the concepts, I think the most useful way to really encapsulate kind of a lot of the conceptual questions is to do a self-recorded video of you talking about a form on your project. It could be any form. I probably the best one to do a recording of is going to be one from your joins table. So just looking at your GitHub, you've got, let's look at your schema. you've got items, user items, and users. So maybe go to a form for user items, could be the one where you're going to create a new user item, or one where you're patching, you're updating a user item, and just pick up the conversation from, but this is not a front end video. This is not a browser video. This is a code video. So you're talking through, starting at the component where you have this particular form, and then skip over the part about the controlled form, because that's really more like phase 2 stuff, and just start from the submission of the form. What happens? What's your understanding of how it works? And that should take you, this is a similar question to what you did in phase 3 with the request response cycle, but it's just much deeper now, because there's so much happening in Rails in terms of like, okay, well, how do we even get to the right controller and the right action? And then once we get to the action, what about, a lot of people forget when they're talking about the action that there should be some kind of authorization to even get to the action, because there's a whole level of protection in your app to say, yes, you get access to my app or not. So you're trying to be chronological and really thorough about telling the story. It should cover a lot of ground. It's going to cover the routes file, the validations, the authorization, the serializer coming out the back end and going back to the front, and then the state management as you get back to the front end, and you're like, okay, here's what's happened in my thens and my follow up from the promise being fulfilled. So it's probably about a 5-minute talk through, but the point of recording it is, first of all, you just put yourself on record saying, this is what I know and this is how I think it works. And you may find in doing that you're like, I need to think about how this works. So it's fine. You don't need to send me the first recording. Once you get a recording that you think is like, okay, this is me talking confidently through the process, then you can share it with me and say, can you give me some feedback on this? And because it's recorded, then it's very easy for me to do it asynchronously. And I can say, I think I lost you. Well, it's a video, so I'll keep going. So it's easy to do it asynchronously and then be able to kind of come back and say, hey, you were good in this part, but you need to talk more clearly about that. So that kind of brings you to the end of what I have to say about the conceptual question prep. In terms of live coding, there's no replacement for practicing live coding. And I have 2 pieces of advice on that front. Number 1, get yourself some kind of like, Code Wars account. I do these in the live coding sessions. Usually we just look at a challenge, get a good chance to practice with tests that will assess whether your solution works or not. This is one we were looking at yesterday in the review session. We didn't get very far, so I didn't think this was really worth doing together, but you get to pick your language, you get feedback about your result. This is going to fail because I haven't really done much here. And it just is a nice way for you to practice Ruby and doing, Ruby coding. I think that's an incredibly valuable asset to bring into the live coding. And honestly, even though you've just done 2 full phases of Ruby, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's really limited in some ways to what happens in the application controller. People don't often write a lot of custom methods in their models, and you don't do a lot of weird stuff in your controller. So it's a very small subset of what you could possibly be coding. And sometimes that hurts people when they get to the live coding in phase 4. So getting in here, practicing array methods, string manipulation, just things like that can be useful to you as you get ready for the live coding. And then the last thing I'd say about the live coding is you really should do a real live coding challenge. I know that, this would be a good resource to share. Let me get this. Well, I'll put it in the comment section or the description. But my colleague Madeline put together a phase 4 kind of repository and then some deliverables to add on. Those, from my perspective, look like they're a little more extensive than the live coding, just because they involve some front end work where you're maybe making a new form and then you're going to do something with the input from that form. I tend to focus solely in back-end work. So starting from a route that, takes a parameter and then going into the back end. I mean, if I'm looking at your lab here, I might make something like make a custom route that takes in a quantity, a number, and then it uses that to find all of the user items that have more than that quantity. And then what I really want you to return is not the user items that you found, but the items that are connected to those user items, something like that. And then there would be some conditional rendering like, well, based on the quantity that you put in, maybe you didn't find anything. So you need to have sort of some error handling where you say that quantity, no items were found with more than that quantity or something like that. When you do the live coding, I think it's really important. This is the last thing I would say is it's really important to hold yourself accountable to the same structure that you will be doing in the live coding. So 20 to 30 minutes, only documentation. You're not using other resources like previous code. I mean, it's fine. Say you need to put a skip before action on your new custom route and you're hitting authorization and you don't want to do that. I don't mind you getting that from somewhere else, but if you want to be really hard on yourself, don't get anything from anywhere else other than documentation. And that means starting with a Google search, but then not going to places like Stack Overflow, blogs, etc. So I think those are the two main things to kind of hold yourself to. And if you want to really bump it up, record yourself while doing it. That should kind of put a little bit of pressure on you, thinking about how you're going to share it with me and I'm going to look at it. And I mean, if there's no replacement for having a person actually there and having this be an assessment, there's a different level of pressure that you're going to feel. But what you're trying to do is reproduce the circumstances as much as possible. So that's what I would say. Again, best bet, if you can, just come to a review session, put in the time, start doing that as soon as you start coming to the end of your project. But if you haven't done that and you've already booked your review or you don't have the time because your time at the program is about to end and you just want to, you got to get this in, then this is the best plan for you to kind of do some work asynchronously on your own. All right. Hope that was helpful.